Hello, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are, and welcome. I believe we're on air. I was doing something else as I clicked the button. That was a silly thing to do, wasn't it? Hello, dear viewer. It's a compact and bijou this morning, or this evening. Um, from your right, there's Rob Thompson. Rob is currently under having microphone problems, so it might be a text conversation only with him. Then the enfant terrible of the drone world, Kevin Finisterre, has joined us. We have the law. Oh, and Kevin's just joined us there. Good day, Kevin. The law in the form of Mr. Ruprecht, and of course, um, from Middle Earth, Bruce Simpson on the end there. Bruce Simpson is the moderator of the beard and is the one person in the world that can give and accord beards the appropriate rights and responsibilities that he believes they have. He left a comment on one of my videos today, so you have to know that. You'll have to have seen that to realize what I'm talking about there. So Kevin has got to be quick. You've got to go and do your supper. Kevin, you've bought us coffee and cake, I believe. Maybe you could run through what's been going on with some Java-related stuff recently.
So obviously in the ongoing story to validate whether or not it was a reasonable decision for the Army to ban DJI products, I spent some time doing additional research. I kind of got sick of people talking about it and speculating and making claims that were unfounded or parroted back from other conversations. So yeah, in the process, I originally discovered this stuff called Tinker, which was made by Tencent. And now I've found, and Tinker was exclusive to DJI Go Android products. And now I found that the iOS products have an analog called JS Patch. And JS Patch in and of itself is controversial. So in further digging into their usage of that last night, I found something called the DJI Cake Playground, which I instantly, I don't know, but I need to be in the DJI Cake Playground because it sounds awesome.
It's like Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory or something.
Exactly. So I don't know that you could antagonize me anymore to look deeper into your code, but what I found was that this Cake Playground was basically related to the JS patch system that I had already found, and it enables what appears to be yet another way to enable DJI developers to download code and hot patch it into your application.
And that's without your knowledge, in effect.
Yeah, the key there is that they can definitely do that silently. And they can choose to enable some pop-ups or toast messages that make you aware, but that's not something that they have to do. So
that breaks terms with the app stores.
Yeah, it breaks terms for the app stores, and in my personal opinion, it also kind of goes against the public PR statements that we're hearing out of DJI. The statements say that they'll protect our data, they'll protect our privacy, and that they will or won't do certain things. Mechanisms like this and basically enable people that wish to bypass and sidestep that stuff, again, silently. So it puts that whole model that's presented of we value your security and your data and your privacy in question, in my humble opinion.
Well, I found it very interesting that we heard about another US Army memo. It's not quite a memo. It was an exception, and it's to allow DJI products as long as they go through an OPSEC process. And then almost instantly we heard about that what was the thing that they said that that's okay to you're going to be able to turn the internet off, and that's being now posted today as secret flights will be able to, which amazes me. People are now saying you'll be able to undertake secret flights with your DJ. It's not what it means at all. But in the meantime, wasn't it yesterday you discovered the cake baking?
Yeah, exactly. So for me, this whole timeline is kind of interesting because there's been statements back and forth about, the first one was, hey, the Army may be banning this, or I think that the running joke was DJI may be getting kicked out of the country, to which that was, met with, oh, you guys are crazy, that's unsubstantiated. Then the for official use only document comes out, which says that that was indeed, kind of factual. And then we move from there into DJI basically crying, I don't know why the Army would kick us out of their stuff. This is, this is total, why would they do that to us? And to me, that just shows their lack of maturity in the security space in the first place. I shouldn't be the one out researching, trying to clarify whether or not it's a valid point that the Army chose to do this. And it's just funny and ironic that while they're out crying about it, I'm literally validating the fact that there were definitely some legit security concerns.
But shouldn't I call you out a bit? That's your job, though, isn't it? At the end of the day, that is what you do. That's what you do for Department 13, isn't it?
Indeed. I mean, it's my job to be aware of the landscape and potential threats and things of that nature. And it's exactly how I operate. But I shouldn't be the one countering DJI PR statements and also helping basically force them out of them, so to speak. So it is what it is.
Oh gosh, I shouldn't get political, but it does rather remind me of your political space over there. Things are discovered and then things are admitted afterwards. But anyway, no, I won't go down that road. So to be clear, this is a security issue that's popped up after the statement that said that there wasn't going to be any more security issues. Do you think that it's the left hand not knowing what the right hand's doing? At the end of the day, it's DJI USA that are releasing these statements. I don't think it's DJI the rest of the world or DJI China. So maybe they don't really know what's going on.
Yeah, and I've said this privately to a number of people and kind of indirectly on Twitter a number of times. I don't envy Brendan Schulman for his job. I don't envy Adam Lisberg for his job. The flip side of that is I don't think either of the two of them are technical enough to understand information that's given to them. So even if a developer came straight out to them and handed them a pile of code and said, see, look right here, there's nothing, it doesn't go anywhere, it's not their expertise or subject matter understanding. They flat out can't make that determination of what's said to them. So in my opinion, the PR and the people that are writing these statements are just parroting things that have been given to them, and they don't know one way or versus the other whether or not they're correct statements, but it's their job to repeat them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's well, oh, what a tangled web we weave. Does anyone else that's here want to jump in and discuss this whilst we're lucky enough to have Kevin with us?
Yeah, Kevin, I'd love to hear. So overall, other than the JS patch and the Tinker file, what other vulnerabilities do you think were identified, or do you don't want to talk more into that?
No, I'm actually I'm all for the dissemination of this kind of information and having more accurate statements out there and whatnot. So apart from Tinker itself, there are some 10-cent libraries that are in the application, and there are a couple other libraries as well that I feel relate to what we would consider to be ad demographic and user tracking. And actually, some of these libraries directly say user tracking in them, and you get a user ID and some attributes are communicated back somewhere. And I hear a lot of people say, well, why do I care about that? Google does this, my web browser does this, and we're conditioning ourselves to think that this isn't a problem. I recently put out some research on something called Silver Push, which was a new evolution of this sort of ad tracking. We have something in the States here called doubleclick.net, which is very entangled in a lot of your common web browsing and brings you all of the wonderful coupons on the side of your browser as you go different places and whatnot. The Silver Push stuff added silent audio beacons to this data collection mechanism that most people aren't even aware of exists. And that word beacon is associated with this data collection practice that people are interested in for capturing demographics and marketing data or whatever. So if you look through the libraries that are associated with DJI Go, you will find beaconing technology, and you will find libraries associated with this whole concept in general. And the argument is the moment that you clicked I agree on the terms of service, you opted into all of this stuff. The counter argument is that there's zero transparency and no method to directly opt out of all of these different communications, and nobody really knows what they are. So Brendan Schulman or somebody might pipe up and say, hey, we value your videos, your photos, and your telemetry data in these press statements, but you'll note very specifically that your marketing demographic data and things about you that may not be considered personally identifiable information, that may be fair game.
So just help me understand that beacon thing. What does that mean?
So these beacons are basically methods for tying identifiable attributes as a user back into these ad tracking database campaign mechanisms and whatnot. So collecting these little bits and pieces of information paints a picture of you as a user and a person without necessarily directly identifying you, but it gives people demographic information to offer you services, sell you things, and stuff like that.
So a beacon might be this user tends to go to that garage a lot, that 7-Eleven or something like that, and therefore that person is likely to be and may like. Is that the sort of thing you mean?
Yeah, definitely. So the Silver Push one that came up, for example, basically a number of Android applications were found that would respond to subsonic combinations of tones that you can't hear, but your computer and your phone can hear. Okay, your computer and your phone constantly have a connection to the internet. All right, so let's say everybody in this chat room is physically sitting in the same room watching a TV show, and the commercials switch on, and in tandem with the commercial being played, subsonic tones get played as well. All of our phones are in our pockets, hear these subsonic tones, and as a result of the libraries embedded in the applications, they all then connect back to some server somewhere. So they now know your GPS location, your phone brand. They know that we're all 5 in the same room, and all sorts of stuff like that. So that's.
Can you guys hear me?
Hey,
this is Rob.
Yep.
Yeah, I switched over to my phone. I just want to speak up on some of these technologies. This would be considered a marketing profile, and this is what people have done in the search engine marketing industry for almost a decade now. It's very valuable information.
And I assume, well, and that's the word, isn't it? Value. That's what DJI would be wanting out of it. It's cost, but someone buy it.
I think, yeah, absolutely. There's a huge monetary value to all of that. That was proven by Google many years ago, and that's very valuable. And that's another thing that we'll never know. We can scream top of our lungs to ask for that information from DJI on where that information is going, what agreements they have with third parties, and how they're actually distributing or leveraging that information. That's stuff
But that argument of if you have a smartphone, you're probably pretty much signing up for that sort of thing all over the place.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway,
So that gets done. But what about the more nefarious purposes, Gary? What about those triggers and things like that being leveraged against individuals or being able to target certain areas? That's really
that was going to be what I say. I mean, if you're in the if you're in a sandy war somewhere, your pop-up advert might be, do you need some more ordnance at the moment or something like that? Would you like to try the new JP233 runway denial weapon or something like that? More effective targeted advertising. So that's one side of it then, was that.
Hey, maybe KF can speak about how DJI for months was trying to deny there was any backdoor any of this stuff, and how they're either completely unaware of their own software or that, there's something nefarious going on there. I mean, look at the history that we have with the Chinese.
Yeah, I think that was kind of mentioned earlier as far as I don't think the left hand and the right hand necessarily know what's going on. And some people just are technically not able to understand the things that they're discussing, which is difficult. Now, you had asked specifically what sort of vulnerabilities were found earlier, and the ad demographic tracking is one. So there's a couple types of vulnerability here. One is your vulnerability as an end user. What sort of risk are you exposed to? That is one type of vulnerability. The other type of vulnerability are the direct, quote, cyber vulnerabilities that have been found, which are their poor programming practices. I released the red herring first just to kind of highlight this sort of stuff. There's about 2 or 3 other public exploits that we have in what we're calling the Slack OG group, but we also have a number of private exploits that are circulating as well. So there are some legit traditional computer security vulnerability issues that are on deck as well. So you got to think of it from both angles when you're discussing the vulnerability aspect.
And at the end of the day, what this really means, because of course the other thing that the community's jumped up and said I've seen far and wide is, it's the military. What does it matter? Nothing to do with us. Look, it says in the original document they've only issued 300 airworthiness certificates. It's not a big market. So what? Who cares? So what difference would it make to me if I was a commercial Part 107 operator or RPL operator in South Africa? Why on earth does it matter?
Well, your security. So that's the fun thing. A lot of people don't necessarily value their security. Simple example of using an iPhone versus an Android phone. A lot of people's Android phones are never patched. The carrier puts them out, and then you're on your own. They're considered a disposable phone. And your inability to update your own operating system may expose you to vulnerability. And that is the reality of the landscape of using a cell phone. But in my opinion, that doesn't necessarily absolve a vendor or manufacturer of best practices and things of that nature, especially when they're going out making public privacy statements and stuff like that. And then more importantly, the lack of transparency prevents people from making educated decisions about whether or not they want to choose to use the technology in the first place.
And talking more on the commercial aspect, and you're right, Gary, there's a lot of talk of saying, well, what does it matter? And then saying, your refrigerator or phone do the same stuff. But yeah, critical infrastructure, data security, corporate espionage, any kind of human intelligence gathering, all of that factors into the UAS and the commercial UAS application of it. Master service agreements and contracts are established that define how that information is to be handled. They define and then put liability on third parties to keep that information safe. There's a lot of things out there, and going more in depth with the vulnerabilities KF mentioned, just the stuff on the surface and how those default settings were set up, you're not securing any of that information. I guarantee you that I couldn't put a percentage on it, but a very large portion of people fly their products with default settings. And that means that all that information is available to be uploaded and sent overseas and expose their clients' information and really violate those contracts and make them liable. That's the major concern for the commercial UAS market in the States.
Well, on the flip side, in the face of things like Tinker and JS Patch, you'll hear things like, we don't have the ability to access your data. Technically, that's correct, but it's also technically completely not factual. We've seen bits of code that check where log files are uploaded from to check if it's from a particular GPS coordinate. They claim that that's for pushing down the appropriate FCC and geofencing changes and stuff like that. Well, funny thing is, all this Tinker stuff that we got into, I found that there is a DJI developer that has specifically committed code to this JS patch project to enable GPS functionality. Okay, so a lot of people know that one way to bypass Apple or Google Store restrictions is to make your malicious code triggerable only via certain conditions, such as being in a particular GPS location. So again, I'm not going to show you any particular code paths right now that maliciously execute code based on location because I don't have one in DJI Go. I could point you to one from the Wukong GCS from many years ago that I've barked about all over high hell that DJI won't recognize. But back on topic, theoretically, in the presence of hot patching mechanisms, especially in the face of a DJI developer adding GPS support to a public hot patching tool, that implies to me that if they wanted to, DJI could very easily say, oh, you know that list of government military base no-fly zones that we have? So let's just take and say, anytime we detect something running in one of these GPS coordinates, we're going to push down some cake. And, you know, we can push down whatever we want in that cake.
Or pull off whatever they want.
Exactly. So the ability to hot patch an application on your phone gives somebody the ability to technically compromise your entire phone. If your phone is compromised, that technically gives somebody the ability to compromise anything your phone is connected to. That means your computer, that means whatever wireless network, you know, whatever. So that's why it matters.
The other part to that, and good thing Jonathan's on this group as well, and he can help talk about it, is the whole state and federal wiretapping aspect that I've talked about before that is a big concern. Those audio files and what it has access to, especially using that hot patch that he just mentioned, based on your geolocation, that violates state law. It violates federal law. That information getting sent across state lines without third-party permission in 11 states and then possibly being sent over to foreign servers, that's a major violation of U.S. state and federal wiretap. And please, Jonathan, tell me I'm wrong there.
I don't normally deal in that area. I mean, each state has all sorts of different wiretapping laws. They have like two-party system, one-party system.
Yep.
And there's also potential
two-party.
Right. So then they also have the defense of saying, well, didn't you click that or somehow in the terms of service or something or blah, blah, blah. Right. So
that was very professional response right there, John.
Let me frame this let me frame this for you in a military's mindset. And this is why the memo went around. All right. So we got some guys, maybe they purchased a DJI product from home, had it sent to base. They're out using it for forward ops because, hey, we can use a drone forward ops. Let's just say someone picked up one of those frequencies drawn by a geofence box in China. Those Chinese sold that data to the opposing force. That's what we're concerned with.
Absolutely.
I
will back Rob up 100%. You can go beyond that because these products have been used on missions already by third-party vendors on federal projects that communication could be taken and extrapolated and leveraged for any intelligence after the fact. So that's exactly one of the ways that could be done. And that's not using any backdoors or any kind of tinker or patch. That's just people using their default settings. That's the exposure that you're talking about for intelligence gathering.
Help me understand it. So if I set up lots of servers that, I'm a customer. So I'll come to you and say, dear vendor, I'm quite interested in any data that might come your way from this particular geofence box. How much you're going to charge me for it? Is that the system you're saying that the setup?
Why not? From what Rob just said, and that's what I've said before, is if they have individuals monitoring certain geolocations, any activity in those areas can be then collected, cataloged, and provided to those third-party bad actors easily.
Yeah, and I want to take into consideration that when originally asked about Tinker, for example, they don't know why it was there, and they, quote, weren't going to use it. That, to me, highlights a problem in their development staff, in the fact that they apparently don't have, any sort of software development life cycle, and there's apparently no accountability at the development level. So if there is a malicious or rogue developer or somebody that isn't paid well, they have certainly been in a position to do whatever they want for a while. And I don't know that DJI has the ability to audit and even understand that fact, for example. If you can acknowledge,
I don't know, Kevin. I don't think I can agree with that. I think DJI mainland can fully understand and comprehend exactly what that means, and figure out what those repercussions are, if not be a party of it themselves.
well, and that's a fair statement. I would say, looking at the way these guys code, they're not security experts, and they're stupid at that level. And I've heard other people, recently I've been asked to help somebody with a project, and they need a security person from China, and the people that they're talking to, that's not even a concept. Like, what do you mean a security person? Like, we don't get that. There's no translation for that for us.
So obviously, that normally when you write a bit of software, then there is a standard to go through. That is your security standard, and there are things and checks and balances in place that would ensure that these sort of things. Because perhaps we've stumbled across what might have happened here. I mean, as you say, you just chuck a great deal of cash at a developer that needs a great deal of cash, and if no one's checking what they're doing, of course it can put stuff in there. I mean, I hadn't thought of it like that. That would be amazeballs if that's the reality of it.
Insider threat is a real big problem for security, so I certainly think they have some plausible deniability with regards to whether or not it was intentionally malicious or not. The point is, regardless, it's there, and anybody that's aware of it could potentially use it. And if you look at the paper, I think FireEye was who originally disclosed the JS patch stuff, and there was a lot of controversy over it being used in Tencent's WeChat. They almost got thrown out of the App Store. I think 1,500 developers got yelled at for using Tinker libraries and stuff like that. It's a very visible issue. I just find it interesting that they, quote, didn't know anything about it, basically.
So then what about other, well, all right, before I move on to that, so another thing that's often said now at the moment is my phone never goes on the internet when I'm flying. I'm never on Wi-Fi. I never connect it when I'm flying. So are they fine? Are those people okay? Anyone?
So if nobody else wants to jump in, I got a good
I'm waiting for, I defer to you, KF, on anything like that, but go ahead.
So this is going to go to the full extreme answer. But look at Natan's power plant. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with that, but basically there was a, quote, cyber weapon deployed to a nuclear power plant. And these networks are supposed to be, quote, air-gapped. They don't connect to the internet. All these excuses that you just listed. There are a lot of things that people will do to ultimately try to compromise things, and some of the things that you think are fictional, people have possibly dealt with. There was a security researcher recently that a lot of people thought was just legit crazy, and he brought this stuff up called bad BIOS, and he claimed the government was monitoring him via subsonic communication through his computer in a back door. That would talk to his phone and exfiltrate data from his computer to his phone and blah, 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 blah. Well, it's kind of funny. I don't know if you heard me talk about that silver push stuff about 20 minutes ago. There were a lot of similarities between silver push and the subsonic communications it uses in the things that this guy was saying. So first comment would be, don't think that because your device is air-gapped or because you think it's air-gapped, that prevents somebody from exploiting it. And then the more simple, Occam's hand lawn razor kind of approach would be, there's a good chance that you might accidentally enable your phone to communicate back with them. And all bets are off, in my opinion, in the presence of this hot patching mechanism and stuff. It only takes 1 or 2 packets calling home, and they could potentially hijack your system.
Yeah. Going beyond that, just the simple user or US commercial side, what they just released and what they're talking about having these blackouts while you fly, you're still going to be recording your audio, video, and telemetry. You're still going to be burning that to these internal disks and plus your SD drive, you're still going to have that on the system itself. So you're talking about clearing out the entire cache and clearing out the entire system. Just because it's not connected to the internet doesn't mean that that data set is not existing. That still exists. You've still collected information. It's still in a recording scenario, so that still can be provided. You know, at that next firmware upgrade or that next time, you know, you turn it on.
Yeah, to read the newspaper or whatever, a couple of packets, then are we saying then a couple of packets could be sent and say, oh, switch this on in stealth mode and leave it on a bit, or turn it on at 4 o'clock in the morning when he's not looking, or something like that, and call home.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
I encourage you to
exactly.
look at early Android research. When people first started publishing information about how to exploit phones, some really fun things were demonstrated, such as locking the end user completely out of the phone. You know, or we all think that when you push the power button, your phone is off or asleep or whatever. People have modified the internals of Android so that they can push malware to your phone that overwrites some things that would be default. And when you push that button, it makes your phone look like it's shut down, but in reality, it's actually still running. They've enabled the microphone, and they're now hot piping your chat live to, you know, pick your favorite country. So, yeah, there's a lot of thing in the realm of possibilities, and I think the interesting thing here is a lot of people, generally speaking, just aren't aware of exploitation techniques and that whole world. So a lot of the stuff is voodoo, or it's not possible, or, you know, it happens to somebody else. But there's definitely a lot of realities in this conversation.
The other reality there is what people do with that intelligence. And, you know, when it, barring the voodoo and sorcery used to do it, there's the hard side of intelligence gathering. And a lot of people aren't looking at that as well, as to what simple information and what complex information can be generated from that. And, you know, what you're really providing using these systems. That's the other side of it that isn't really talked about that much.
Well, this
Let me address,
Sorry,
let me address the people that think that they're not important, because for starters, you don't actually know what you're mapping. You should know what area is sensitive or not. You're not intelligence gathering, and you haven't been authorized to even know. So how would you know if you're actually mapping something out? Then the mindset of the war fighter in the Asian continent is much different than our perspective. For starters, they're playing this like a 20-year game. You know, it might take them 20 years to map the whole place out. They honestly don't even care, because at that point they'll have all their drones built. Just another high alert that they're way out in front on innovation, and they're starting in the lower levels in grade schools. And I just don't see anything else like that in the world. So, you know, that's where we're going to be competing on 20 years from now. So don't think about right now and I'm not important. You don't know that you're not important. You don't know what information you're giving them.
I agree completely with that, Rob. No,
it's okay, Rob. You're everything to us. Don't worry, Rob. Don't feel unimportant, Rob. You're everything to us. That leads me to the carrier in Scotland, parked in Scotland. Okay, so it's not actually the Royal Naval's carrier yet, because it's not been handed over. It's not got all the shooty bits on and all those other good things. But somebody did fly over the deck and even got the strong wind warning on their Phantom 4 Pro, and the thing auto landed on the deck of the UK's shiny, flashy carrier. So I likened it on a video I made that Bruce abused me on to the Million Monkeys typing, and eventually coming out with the works of Shakespeare. If to my mind, if that's some useful intelligence to them, they've got it now. They've managed to get it, and nobody had to travel. Nobody had to go there. Somebody else did it for them. Is that the mindset of this sort of data gathering?
Absolutely.
If this sort of data gathering happens,
100%. You're talking about an entire industrial complex of intelligence gathering, and as Rob said correctly, it's the long play. It's not, you know, an immediate situation. It doesn't have to specifically deal with one piece or one location. It's the compiling of that, They have the resources. That's how they think. That's how those, like I said, the industry is designed from their point of view. And every bit of that is cataloged, marked, and then leveraged in a time in the future. So that is absolutely correct.
Yeah, and they've in essence crowdsourced it, if you want to look at it like that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's it. And that's I made a point earlier that, when you look at the United States intelligence assets, you're talking about 10,000 strong or so. Just in the US alone, there's over 300,000 drones flying commercially. So globally, you're looking at 1.5, 1.8 million intelligence gathering assets. Crowdsourcing is absolutely the right word for that.
Well, all right. Another argument that's going around. I'm not seeing tons and tons and tons of data going out of my phone. I mean, what's it worth? They know where I'm flying, so what? People are saying that nothing of any high value is going out.
So I'd say one thing. I don't know if you noted when a lot of this conversation started a couple months back, I was very careful in cautioning people to not make statements that couldn't be validated and whatnot.
Yeah.
And one of the hot topics for me specifically was the cached audio files that stored your local, or the cached video from your flight that stored your local audio from your phone. We never found evidence. I have yet to this day to see a piece of code that uploads those files to their servers. But I do want to point out that in the face of this new hot patching conversation, I will 100% state that now they are definitely in a position to access those files if they wanted to, or if somebody wanted to. So elements of that conversation that folks were having previously, I think are more valid than they were, a month or so back. But I still will hang my hat on the fact that I don't know that anybody has actually captured them, for example, pushing Cake, as it were. But now I'm going to definitely be looking for this cake.zip file that I know exists very adamantly.
I mean, that's fabulous sort of coder sort of nonsense, isn't it? Have your cake and eat it. Take that, Mr. Finnis there. That's fabulous nonsense, isn't it?
So the fun thing about Cake, where I was heading, is that what's it worth, right? So
yes.
The first thing that I found was funny about that JS patch stuff was that I caught a DJI employee directly editing, the code base and adding the GPS feature. The second funny thing is when I started tracing the origin of the Cake code, it was written by somebody that works at Baidu. And you'll see Baidu, Tencent, Alibaba, all of those grouped into the same kind of umbrella and whatnot. So if you go back to who cares about this data, why is it valuable? Why the heck is somebody from Baidu working on a hot patching system that gets pushed into Android applications? That's kind of funny to me. I don't know. Maybe it's a coincidence.
So could you also then say this is just an Android thing, and this is just going into all Android devices and just happens to be going by?
Well, JS patch is most definitely not going into all Android applications. That's not at all. I think the most prevalent places that this stuff has been seen is in WeChat, which is the Chinese everything application. I've heard it explained as, if you had Facebook, Uber, Tinder, Twitter, eBay, everything merged into the same application, and your bank, so you could pay for all this stuff from the same location, then you would have WeChat. Well, this platform happens to be known for censorship and controversy around people being monitored and whatnot. And this JS patch and tinker mechanism, in my opinion, directly enables that sort of stuff to occur. So there's some other sidebar conversations about parallels in this type of technology that are very questionable when you look at them at a high level.
I said in what I wrote earlier, I think we ought to have a for charity sweepstake, because that aircraft carrier is sailing into Portsmouth, the big naval base in the South. It's gone around England. It's going into Portsmouth tomorrow. There is going to be an air display and all sorts of VVIPs and all that sort of thing. So there's flight restrictions around it. But I guarantee tomorrow morning there will be a video of it on YouTube. And it's almost pick the time. At what time will the first video of that aircraft carrier from a DJI platform appear in the morning? And it is crowdsourced, as you say, you know. So what we're saying potentially is, and allegedly, and maybe not. So you switch it on, that user's on the phone. It calls home and says, "Oh, hey, yeah, I'm flying in the area you're really interested in. Oh, all right, great. I'll pull all the data and start recording. Thanks very much. Oh, and Trev's down the road flying here. Ian's over there, and this and that and the other." So they can almost get a real-time picture. Am I being too conspiracy theory? I haven't got a tin hat today. Am I too conspiracy theory with that thinking? Anyone?
Like, for me, all bets are off with that, with hot patching. I mean, they have zero accountability on it, and that enables anything to occur with their code. And
So I just wanted to ask, because Kevin, you mentioned about you were discounting the audio and video cache being uploaded through regular triggers. Is that correct? You're saying that you didn't see any evidence
I
of
have
that through regular upload of flight record?
Yeah, well, flight records and video are different, but yeah, I've yet to see somebody directly produce a piece of code that showed that local cached audio was ever uploaded to a server. And
I just had a quick question about the SQL file that's in that data. What is that data store for?
the SQLite data.
Yeah.
Yeah, we found there is a SQLite database that is associated with Tencent's ad tracking mechanism that we kind of discussed ad nauseum.
Well, and that's what I'm saying, because in that there's also a class called ZDB Video, which actually has that entire cache put together. So I'm curious as to why they would need this database schema set up to completely carry everything that's collected if it wasn't going anywhere.
Yeah, I know the guys on Slack have basically encouraged people, just like we're doing with this JS Playground and Tinker stuff, is for people to take decompiled snippets, blog post them, tweet them, and actually show these code paths specifically, so that more intelligent conversation. I'd love to see that code path you're talking about, but I will certainly, without question, say that a number of the libraries that are implemented are just sketchy in and of themselves.
I like that professional term. That's just shit sketchy, and that's why there's complete classes here that are show username, thumb, lat longs, complete information that this is designed to capture that information and then pack it and send. So why would this exist if it wasn't going anywhere? And it has embed URLs. The entire list here is kind of just in awe of what is actually being collected.
Yep. So
they could just pull all this data in 10 years from now, and no one would even be the wiser.
Where would they pull it from in 10 years' time, though? Where would it have waited for 10 years?
Who knows what they'll do with the information? We don't know that, and I'm not able to really discuss it. But I'm telling you is that they're pulling it for purposes. I mean, just like they all said, all the databases were set up this way, like on purpose. And the other problem is, if they're riding off this code, we don't even know who's riding on the code because there's no standards. There could be other countries that's doing nefarious stuff, and we'll never know.
The one string I just want to say, and we can move on from it, is under that video's, SQ system, you actually have two strings identified as upload time and full audio cache. That makes no sense whatsoever if it's not going anywhere.
Yeah, I encourage you to join the Slack OGs and hop into the Android APK patching and talk with Binary and I and a number of the other folks. And let's all write this up and get some. It sounds like you're one of few people that is actually knowledgeable on parts of this code path. So yeah, join the resistance, my friend.
Join the resistance.
Resist.
I've done my part. I've done my part, KF. I'm watching from the sidelines from now, I guess.
Well, I'm going to respectfully give you some intelligent discourse and say you've given me some snippets to follow. We're all busy as shit. Please jump in and write a blog post, dude, for real, because you're mentioning things that probably 90% of the people on this podcast don't even have any clue what you're talking about. So you can say, hey, I know for a fact I've seen this JS cache thing or whatever, and I actually talked to Adam Lisberg about some things that we saw. For example, there's a flag that says should continually monitor or something like that, and is in China. Okay, and we've linked this back to a particular section where there is a telemetry upload, and his response back to me was something along the lines of, please don't hold us accountable for the names of specific fields that you may see in the code. And that's a completely legit statement. It's one of those.
How's that legit? How's that legit? I don't understand.
Because again, as a developer, for example, I might name a variable dirty cat turd. That in no way implies anything. I might name something, I hate Brendan. Again, that maybe I do, maybe I don't. Maybe I put it in the code to be a there's many reasons for code variables to have specific names. And unless you fully traced out the code path, you cannot accurately say something just because you've seen a word. I saw the word playground in cake in here. That doesn't mean there's a piece of cake in the darn code. You know what I mean? Like it has some other meaning. So to be pedantic about it is in my opinion the best approach. Yes, on the surface it looks really super sketchy. I'm not denying that at all, but let's please discuss validated snippets of decompiled code and traceable paths that actually validate 100% what's being implied.
So that's what you'll do then. You'll join the dots. You'll go along. You'll say, as you say, big red cat or whatever, and that goes there, 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 and there. That's what big red cat does, and then that's the point at which you're happy.
Very much so.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I get it now. Now the reason I bought Rob on was because he's counter US, as you are, Kevin, as well. So that big aircraft carrier is arriving in Portsmouth tomorrow. There's going to be lots of people flying. I understand there are going to be some counter UAS measures tested tomorrow. What might they look like, and is counter UAS really where I should be trying to make some money in the drone business now?
That's funny about making some money. Well, I hope Kevin's Department 13's over there, because I think they got the best technology for this particular purpose. Anything that's going to be, using nets or kinetic stuff is going to have to be right on board the ship, and I kind of doubt we'll see any of that. But it will be interesting if they find someone and then prosecute them. Fair warning to other folks.
Yeah, so this space is difficult. I like to tell people it's like a haystack full of needles, and as somebody that works for a counter UAS company, my best effort is to be able to grab as many needles out of that haystack as I can. But we'd all be fools to think that there weren't a couple left in it. So this unfortunately has to be a cooperative and collaborative effort of a number of systems and processes and things like that to work effectively. And I don't know what the threat model looks like for this particular ship. But for me, a lot of this conversation starts with threat modeling. You need to determine what you actually care about. Maybe they don't care about somebody actually filming the thing like you're discussing. Maybe that's not even worth their effort or time. Maybe it is. But again, that gradient of threat needs to be determined first of all. And then from there, you can determine what the appropriate response is. And then that's where you start looking at whether it's kinetics or RF-based mitigations, or simply choosing to ignore something.
I think you're very much into the RF and almost take over the device and maneuver it off somewhere else, tell it to go home or whatever, or crash it somewhere where you know it's safe, rather than the kinetic sort of things. That's your line of work, isn't it, Kevin?
Yeah, most definitely. I've taken my traditional computer security, vulnerability assessment, and penetration testing background, and instead of the very broad focus of SCADA devices, utility work, cell phone security, medical security, it's now micro focused on drone security, basically, and security and exploitation really go hand in hand. I understand the lack of security, which allows me to exploit vulnerabilities in drone systems. And I'm one of a number of people on our team whose logic is then productized and put into the Mesmer platform. Like you guys mentioned today, that the military is moving towards the Android attack platform for standardization, and that possibly one of the threads in this DJI conversation is that once there's a DJI attack plugin, that then the military could use the platform more in a more trusted fashion. Our platform is implemented on attack, for example, so it's something that people that would be tasked with protecting something like that would be very familiar with, for example, and would be able to integrate into their existing processes and procedures for risk management and threat assessment, if that makes sense.
Does that mean that then through the attack system, your friendlies could make themselves known to your Mesmer system more easily because it's all one love and all together? Is that where you're going with that? Yeah,
we blatantly have a whitelisting system that is based on our understanding of the protocols and that we can detect and mitigate. And we have the ability to whitelist your specific drone based on its RF footprint, if you will.
This actually opens up all sorts of UTM conversations, doesn't it? If the attack becomes a system for the military and that becomes a standard, then why don't we all use that for you? Don't want to go down that wormhole. But yes, it's making me think fast. I thought they were going iOS. I thought they'd given up on that. Whilst it's interesting that a memo's come up, an exemption to allow the use of DJI stuff once the attack stuff's done. I thought it was going to iOS. So it's interesting that that's coming back. Is there any sort of intelligence about that?
Yeah, I don't know specifically there on which flavors are the current of the month. I am aware that there are hardened implementations of Android, and because they're open source, there can be a higher level of control, so to speak. iOS is basically a black box for the most part in that regard. So there may be some advantage of using one versus the other.
Because that, of course, that's another thing I've been seeing written a lot is, this is because the army hates Android, and it's like, no, it couldn't be further from the truth. It's just everyone's writing that. Oh, it's because it's Android. It's like, no, it's not. But anyway, Rob, I haven't asked you enough about your counter UAS group, or even mentioned your counter US group. How is that going? And just tell me about it. What's the state of play with it at the moment?
Yes, the CUAScoalition.org. You can check out our website, but that's going very well. We're in the very beginning stages of setting up with the agencies. I've been contacted by all the points of contact for, counter-related stuff and for also UAS. I've turned a lot of folks away, and just be patient with us, because I believe once the agencies are set up, then we'll have a great roadmap and framework to work from. So all those individuals that keep emailing me, I read your emails. I'm inundated with a ton of them, and we're just holding back right now until we have a good framework in place.
So I've got to wait till I come to you to make my money out of counter UAS. But anyway, no, I'm just being facetious. Look at the time. We've talked away. I'm expecting Kevin to be here for 5 minutes. He's been here 54 minutes.
I got one more that I really want to bring up before we close up.
Go on. Well, no, we're going to go over the hour, but I know you've got to make supper and your lad's going to school. But carry on, Kevin.
My wife hasn't come down and yelled at me yet, so I'm good. The higher level topic is awful. Nazis in Charlottesville. So don't want to talk about that specifically, but there was a boatload of fake news about somebody bringing down a helicopter with a drone.
Yes, yes, there was. I avoided any mention of that because you're bob on right. That was fake news. Has that died down over there now? I don't see it as much now.
I wanted to point out a couple of very specific things in that. Number one, there is a video from a guy, I think his name was Revolution Z or something like that, and he actually was the guy that captured the guy running people over. And if you look at the start of his video, he's filming a guy with a DJI aircraft, and this guy is complaining about not being able to take off. And you can see you can hear a helicopter flying directly above him. And one of his cohorts that's with him pipes up and says something like, "Oh, I know why we can't take off. It's because the helicopter." And I hear
I know where you're going with this.
signals and blah blah blah. And he makes up some complete nonsense. So, main point: they are unable to take off. Okay, so within a 3 to 5 minute point of that video starting is when this dude runs people over. And I'm sure I could use a better word for dude, so forgive me for the lack of strong word there. But this is when that happened. So if you look at the news now, there is an overhead shot from a drone of the whole scene. So if you take the timeline span of about 5 to 10 minutes, it's pretty clear that the drone that filmed the scene of the incident was in the air at the time that helicopter was in the air. So although the direct correlation that somebody ran a helicopter or ran a drone into the helicopter is not substantiated and is correct, I would point out that without a doubt there were multiple idiots flying in that area with helicopters in the air. And I've tweeted at least 3 different videos or photos of that occurring.
Well, this is the point where we need to listen out to that RF traffic, and we don't need to have kinetic actions or anything like that. This is the remote ID sort of thing, isn't it? This conversation could go on and on, couldn't it? But if you listen out to those data streams, you'd have heard it, and some identification could probably have happened. Can of worms.
One thing I'll let you know is I used to live in Charlottesville, and the guy was an instructor, the main helicopter pilot at an airport probably 30 miles from my house. I don't know it for a fact, but I feel he was trained by my grandfather. And I pretty much feel that it had to be a mechanical error because this guy's a really sharp, state trooper helicopter pilot. We'll find out eventually what happened, but I don't think it was a drone.
Yeah.
NTSB.
Yeah, no, the NTSB will jump on that pretty quickly, and the whole thing was a terrible, super sad thing. And it's an awful thing. Let's try and lighten that up. This is Bruce. Get ready with some jokes. Get ready with some jokes. Call Bruce. Get ready with some jokes.
Why do you want me to lighten it up? Actually, I was listening to the conversation, as you can see, and this reminded me of something. We've got Android, we've got iPhone. Anyone remember the BlackBerry? And it was a secure phone. It was like its reason for existence was that it was deemed to be secure. I'm wondering if perhaps everyone's seeing a problem here with this, these libraries that could be updated sort of randomly or by third parties, and all the holes, the gaping holes in the Android framework, and to a degree the iOS framework as well. I wonder, this isn't a problem, it's an opportunity. Who's going to come out with something they're going to say, well, we've got this secure system and it can be independently certified or whatever by whatever, and then they would have a doorway into the military applications and all that sort of stuff. I'm sure there must be companies out there working there right now saying we're going to be the BlackBerry of drone operating systems and drone support technology. And I don't know why it's taken so long, but it would seem to me to be a very good idea.
Isn't that what this Android attack version is going to turn out to be?
Yeah, that's
Sorry,
for the
Rob.
attack thing. I'm thinking also, I mean,
There's a
what we need is a complete integrated solution with, why doesn't DJI, for example, bring out their secure version, which they have their own tablet, which is their own proprietary technology. Let's face it, they develop technology. The reason their products are so good is because they've got so much really cool hardware and firmware on board that do things like collision avoidance and that sort of stuff. So why can't they come up with the secure version for military and high security commercial applications? They would then nail that part of the market. No one else would have a league in, or alternately, a different company could come out, Unique or someone else, or Walkera or one of the toy companies could come out with one of these, totally secure, independently verified platforms that can be used for these high security, high sensitivity applications. I mean, this gaping hole in the market, why isn't someone filling it?
I'll already tell you that there's a military standard called DO 178, and if you follow those standards, then you'll be approved by any of the military. Now, whether a company wants to go through that process, it's akin to the 333 and Part 107. It's all these different hoops, and I've heard it costs $100 a line of code with millions of lines of code. So, it's an expensive process, but it already exists, and I recommend someone try it.
Yeah, and don't forget there was the Smack 'em pilot effort where the guys tried to take the RG pilot hardware and make it all super secure. And the problem with a lot of this stuff is it's a cat and mouse game. People always make mistakes. Making secure systems is extremely difficult, and it increases the cost a lot. The reason DJI can't put out a secure system currently is because they think culturally lack the understanding of security. So that's a higher level transformation or change for them as a entity before they can do something like that. But yeah,
that's a huge statement, Kevin. Does that apply to the whole of China?
Well, so again, there are cultural differences in the way people approach things, and I think it's been said over and over that intellectual property, for example, is not valued in China. It's everybody's code. It's not your code. I've worked with developers from India who are, for a lack of a better word, puppy mills for code. I mean, they just churn out code left and right. And in a lot of situations, they don't understand the concept of security either. So I've worked with a bank that was outsourcing code to India to write a platform for whatever, and I had to be the liaison between their India code team to say, hey, I don't care if you understand this concept. Like, it is not acceptable for me to go to a website and be able to type in a SQL statement on the end of the URL and query the database. Like, I don't care if you don't understand that from a fundamental concept level, but I need you to code like this. And the problem is if you don't have a project manager that's smart enough to notice things like that and point them out, there's a lot of garbage code that winds up in people's platforms, and nobody's the wiser to even know that it's there in the first place, which is why I mentioned some of the plausible deniability on the malicious aspect of this. Despite all of the fingers that may be pointing, towards the malicious aspect, there is always that level of plausible deniability, in my opinion.
Do you think that the European regulators have tweaked to all this already, and what the reason they're clamping down so much on where you can fly and how high you can fly and how far you can fly is because they're aware of the potential for this sort of third-party intervention to capture all this data, and the only way they can see to prevent it is to restrict where people can fly their drones. Otherwise, we're going to have our phones, and China will send down a little bit of because the filtering will be done at the phone end. All the data won't go back to China. That would be stupid. It's just too much of a drain, as people say, on their data on their phones, and too much data to process. So if there is something happening at a particular place in the world, they can just send out the coordinates, and only the drones operating within that area will send data back. In that particular case.
I'll disagree with you on that, Bruce. I don't think there's any issues with the amount of data being sent back, and I don't think that would ever be, a reason that people don't collect everything to begin with. It's better to collect everything and sift through it later than to restrict.
And I got a more simple answer. They use Amazon. Most of their stuff is hosted on Amazon. It doesn't need to go directly back to China.
There you go. Maybe it gets uploaded on, a MOS to Amazon, and then it's filtered through a geospatial filter, or location.
So
You'd
they're
sure notice it here in New
already
Zealand, though. In New Zealand, we pay a fortune for our data. It's a ridiculous prices for mobile data. So
Exactly.
if I was out in the
Exactly.
field, I would know if a few hundred megabytes of data were being sent from my phone. And again, you've got to process it at the other end. So why would you bother collecting data that you don't need? They're going to be smart about it. And I think that's what's probably going to happen is, you're going to have the filtering. So only the areas that are of interest will send data back. And then it becomes more covert. Flies under the radar longer.
I encourage you guys to open up DJI Go and just let it run for a month and tell me how much data you get at the end of the month. There are a number of people on forums that have said, why the hell has this thing chewed through 35 meg of data? I didn't even open it or do anything with it. It's just sitting there. So yeah, just check it out sometime.
well.
My phone doesn't run DJI Go. How do I get on? There's a reason I have this phone.
You're
Don't
right.
challenge me, Bruce. I'll make it run there.
Oh dear, then you need to get out more, because you really shouldn't be wasting your time on stuff like that. I can use another data sharing example. One of our cell phone networks been caught out because on its LTE network it calls home every night, and people are leaving their phones and tons of data, and exactly as Bruce says, data is very expensive here, and people notice when it disappears from their phone. And they've been if you're in a 3G area, they don't charge you for that little connection call to say hello, I'm still alive, or whatever it's doing. But in LTE areas, because it's LTE, it gets a little charge, and people are getting whilst they're not using the data themselves, or they are, but then the phone is, they're getting a charge and they're noticing it. So yeah, that I agree with Bruce. That is, I don't quite dig that. But if it was only lighting up in the areas like Portsmouth tomorrow when it's there, you might not notice 5 or 6 or 10 megs tomorrow on your day out in Portsmouth. If it did every time you flew, it would. But it's all supposition, isn't it? Because we don't really know that this is what is actually happening. So I think we're going to be.
I've got to dip out myself, but on that point, like you said, I encourage people to stop speculating, stop flapping your gums, open up a debugger, learn to decompile some things, and find me a code path or a snippet of code that validates your wild imagination. And if you look at what I've been doing the past 2 weeks, that's why you see Tinker, and that's why you see this JS patch stuff, is because I'm stopping just running my mouth, and I'm actively doing research and validating my concerns. So I hope more people are able to do that. And if you're not technically able to do that, find somebody that can help you validate your statements and just stop the pontification, in my opinion. So
fair play to you. Best of luck tomorrow, Kevin. I know it goes. Done it 3 times now. So good. Best of luck anyway, and enjoy your supper. Thank you very, very much for taking the time to join us. And once you've gone, we'll talk about you.
Peace out, fellas.
All right. Take care, mate. Cheers, Kevin. Right. So, he's gone now. Good. Let's talk about say, Bruce. Well, no, look, Miss R. First, let's go to the word of the law. The word of the law has been fairly quiet. We're over 8 minutes over. We'll do a few more minutes. Jonathan, what's been happening in your world? We haven't seen you for a while. Don't tell me you've been busy.
I have been preoccupied with legal work then, if I can't say busy. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if you guys saw recently the article I put out on the Drone Operator Safety Act. It's back in 2016, there was a version similar to this. It was primarily focusing on it was different types of controlled airspace. This is a much more kind of like a defined area. And basically, just kind of quick rundown is that there's kind of 2 parts to it, where that if you fly in this runway exclusion zone, which goes about 1 mile off the end of each runway, and it's about 1 mile. It's about half a mile. So in reality, it's about 1 by 1. And if you go into that zone, if you don't have an authorization, then you're actually committing a federal misdemeanor. If it results in death, you can actually be fined up to $250,000 fine. If it's just you flying in there, it's a $100,000 fine and or also a year in federal prison. And the other interesting part about this is that while that part of the provision this is just a proposed bill, by the way, that was introduced in Congress. this that was focusing primarily on the airport, while the other part of it was specifically speaking to interfering with aircraft. So it says specifically that you cannot fly the aircraft in doing so knowingly, recklessly interfering with or disrupting the operation of an aircraft or other airborne vehicles, and in a manner that poses an imminent safety hazard to such occupants. If you do that, that's actually another federal misdemeanor, and if there is a serious bodily injury or death, that you can actually be imprisoned up to life, which kind of makes sense if you're going to try to go after maybe say an airliner. It's kind of like attempted murder for multiple people or something like that, or and so that I think that's kind of the reasoning behind that. Is this going to be likely to actually happen? Based upon it didn't happen before, I don't think it's going to happen again. Maybe they might try to quickly include it into the next FAA reauthorization that is coming up. So that's all having to get done by September the 30th. And currently the House is on recess, for summer recess, and the Senate, they just started their recess as of the end of Friday. And so Senate's not coming back until I think like second or third week in September, and House isn't coming back until the 3rd. And so then somewhere in the middle of all that, they're going to have to figure out quick FAA reauthorization before the 30th. And so some people are kind of wondering if they're going to try to take this language and sneak it in to either the House or the Senate version for the FAA reauthorization, and just kind of also backing out on a macro scale here, just kind of leaving the drone industry aside because it is kind of small. The House version was trying to propose a privatization of ATC, and the Senate version did not have that. So there's going to be a stalemate there at some point, and so that's why it's going to have to be probably a quick, clean reauthorization of some sort, and then you might look for some people trying to sneak in some quick drone provisions and stuff, similar to what happened back last year with the FESA that passed. So that's just kind of the update here on the legal things.
Sneak stuff in, that never happens. That never ever happens. I mean, how dare you suggest
a lot of that? And so I've already heard, it's gonna be an FAA reauth extension, because if they were actually going to go through with the whole plan, then we would see the scheduling of the rooms and all the fervor that comes along with having the arguments, and none of that's been set up. There's more pressing issues, so I'm telling you right now, look sadly for an extension.
It is obvious, isn't it? It'll come down to the person that books the catering. They'll be the people that actually really knows. Yeah,
there you go.
Craziness. So hopefully it's just an extension, and there's no skullduggery happens, and none of this language gets moved in the meantime. And the ATC modernization, that's dead in the water now, isn't it? Or is that still likely to come and trip us up?
I think that'll probably be dead in the water. Yeah, that's kind of interesting to see, how that's playing out and who's kind of for or against it. AMA kind of came out for the Air Act, and AUVSI looks like it's put out some article. I kind of read it in the sense that they were kind of highlighting the Senate bill. And so it's going to be interesting to see who comes down on what side. I mean, ultimately, do people think privatization of the ATC, is that going to be better for bringing along like UTM situation and the Lance program and all that? Potentially. I don't know. It's kind of interesting to see who's coming down on what side in this whole thing for the recreational guys as well as the commercial guys.
I'm dead against it. I don't know. What's your thoughts, Rob?
Well, this extension has to go through, and a lot of times they lump stuff in together based on alliances beforehand. Stuff under Feinstein, though, her track record's pretty bad, 0 and 4. So I wouldn't look for anything coming from her wheelhouse actually getting through. Other folks, such as in my state here, Senator Warner, he has a drone act of some sorts. Look for some of that to be pushed into the extension. Both sides unanimously agreed on a registration. Look for that to be in the extension as well. And some fine-tunements to Part 107. They may put some stuff in there that hobbyists won't enjoy. And they're going to allude to let's see, airworthiness, because traditionally the talks of innovation about those things will begin in March of next year. So they need to put a refresher out there that that's coming. That's what I'm seeing.
Dodgy days, dodgy days. Oh, I know one thing I haven't mentioned. Did everyone see that delivery drone out of Presswick? I was hoping they're going to come on. Hopefully they'll come on next week and they'll talk about that. That's a more light-hearted thing. Did anyone see that thing? No, yeah, no. Yeah. All right. What's in the links below? It looks cool. Bruce, did you have anything interesting, exciting, light-hearted, or jokey to say?
Nah.
No.
Not much. No. Except for that thing where the police action against a drone 107 pilot failed in Chicago, I think it was. He was flying his drone completely legally and safely and within all the parameters and guidelines laid out by the FAA, and the police arrested him and charged him with something, I don't know. Anyway, he won his case, but it shows you how the regulators are going to have a problem at keeping the enforcers up to date and basically showing them what's right and what's wrong. These guys obviously got it completely wrong and the case got thrown out of court.
What was your take on that, Jonathan? Mr. Antonelli did that one.
Right. Jeff did that one up there. And so I've seen the local guys, they haven't really caught up with what actually is going on. So there's a lot of lag there. So some of these laws and the stuff that was put into place, they'll have it where it's talking about like Section 323 exemptions. They all jumped in and started trying to play FAA, not really knowing what in the world they're talking about. And then what ends up happening what happens is it hinders businesses over and over again. You could try to be as lawful as you want, and then you have some police officer who doesn't really know what in the world's going on, somehow has a GPS built into his brain, and you're somehow super close to an airport. And then now you're going to get in trouble, or you didn't see this happen or whatever, and he's going to arrest you. I've seen this happen multiple times throughout the United States. The typical one is careless and reckless flying. You had Remy Castro and what's his name, Mendoza over in New York City. You had that also happen with the pipeline situation with Turgeon. So it happens multiple times. There's an aircraft in the air, there's people on the ground or whatever, and there's a drone, and you have an overzealous officer that just decides to arrest, and they don't really know what's going on with the FAA. They're not a federal officer, so they pick some local or state law that they can get you under, and then they nail you with it, and then you got to pay an attorney and have to deal with that whole mess. So this is happening more and more, and I think it needs to be put to an end here with some action from Congress trying to expressly preempt the operation of these aircraft. And so that needs to be taken care of, because this is just getting old.
Well, yeah, hopefully all of these things will move through Congress and stuff, and it'll get sorted out one day, isn't it? But it keeps getting kicked down the road, as is traditional with these sort of things. So I suppose, look, it's 17 minutes past. We somehow managed to go well past the hour there, very easily, surprisingly. So that was grand. Does anyone else have anything else? Go once. Well, before we do, I'll tell you what we'll do. Let's go down the line. Bruce, tell me what your websites are, and tell me why people shouldn't subscribe to them.
I've got too many websites to list, actually, but probably my YouTube channels are probably the more relevant things, and that's XJet, which is my little ranty things about regulation, and RC Model Reviews, where I talk more about the technology and also the theory behind the technology. It's educational and informative, so go there, subscribe, like, all the things that Gary says to do.
Jonathan, where's your website these days? Which one should we be looking at?
My website is jruprechtlaw.com. If you just type in probably Joan Lawyer or Drone Law Firm or something like that in the internet, I'm probably one of the top 3 on Google. Just go find me that way. And I have a bunch of different articles on the drone laws, state drone laws. I've been trying to compile the database of that, and also have a free Part 107 study guide that I put out so you can study for your remote pilot certificate.
I was going to mention that. Well done, you. And Kevin, where do we find you? I never know what you do, actually.
You just LinkedIn's the best place to find me.
Okay, cool. All right.
Best way to say
and then we go all the way across there to Rob. Where just go with your URL again, whichever one you like, I suppose.
Oh, the CUAScoalition.org. If you're interested in countermeasures with drones.
Perfect. All right.
And then also check out my Twitter. It's at EA. If you want the real skinny and some insightful memes on the Chinese.
Hashtag Chicoms. So with that,
hashtag
Chicoms. Dear viewer, thank you very much for taking the time to stay with us and for indulging us with your time for our rants. Like, subscribe, do all those good things. Tell your friend, tell your grandmother, whatever you like. We don't really mind. It's all good. Thank you very much. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining. See you all again, 2100 GMT every Tuesday. It's the future for Bruce. And with that, I'll say goodbye. They press the button, didn't they?